What a 1, 2, 3 clap.
That would
So
be
you'll
better.
clap at the same time.
Yeah.
David, if you put your headphones up near your mic, then his clap will get picked up by all our mics at the same time.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's our little trick. There we go.
All right, we mastered the clap.
Are we like live?
We're live.
Live, like we're streaming?
Yes.
People are watching us?
Thousands.
What's the URL?
Oh my God, I have to tweet out the URL. It's on our Twitter account, right? It goes to that automatically?
Twitch.tv/LC, Star Wars LC.
Uh-huh. Oh my gosh, we are live. There are so many people watching us because so many people tune in all the time. This is
so
such
many
pressure.
Questions.
Let me just make sure my other computer's muted. All right. So we'll give people their 38 seconds to get on because that's clearly all it takes. Our big fans.
Very nice.
All right. So welcome back to another week of Star Wars Loose Cannon. I am Alex Lowe here for the first time in a long time without either Nick Oswald or Patrick Ebersole. So you're getting the real, full-forced, prequel-loving take on Star Wars this week, folks. But don't worry, I am here with producer Chris.
Hey, guys. I'm also a fellow prequel lover.
Aha! Class of 2009 high school people attacking. Though I think Patrick is also class of 09, so that doesn't help. But because it was only going to be me and Chris this week, we have a very special guest, David Kimball. He is a Nintendo variety streamer on Twitch. You can find that at David V. Kimball, and you can find him on basically every other social you can think of at the same thing. Friendster, I don't know. He's a Star Wars fan who's got some thoughts he wanted to bring to the people. Also, Jones Soda lover. So maybe we'll touch on that a little bit later in the pod. But David, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. That was quite the introduction. And I'm just setting up my MySpace right now, so it's looking pretty good.
Oh, okay. Cool,
yeah.
Cool. I'm glad you're right on top of things.
Yes, sir.
So as you've said, you occasionally listen to the show. So that's flattering. But we're now past the sequel trilogy. So what are you here to talk about?
Well, it was funny because Chris reached out to me about this show, and we were kind of thinking like what a good topic would be. It's funny, you guys both said you're prequel fans. I'm right there with you. I am a prequel
Yes, we've
fan.
got 100% prequel fans on one episode. This is the greatest night of my life.
I am.
We can just talk about the prequels all night, baby. Right? We're talking about the prequels, right? That's what the show's gonna be about.
The whole
pod
thing.
racing.
But what's funny is like I did listen to the previous episode, and there's a bunch of things actually that I think will lead really well into our discussion for today. And one thing about it, so the topic, let's just say it, because everyone's already seen the title of the podcast in their podcast app. They already know what it's about. But just for posterity, let's say it out loud. I don't think the sequels are going to age very well.
All right. Now, before we get into that and I respond, this is going to be an editing break. Chris, are you recording the call, or do we have a way to do that?
With Discord, I don't know, David.
Okay,
do you know if
I just noticed that
we have it
for
on
some
Twitch
reason
as a backup, so
like my Audacity recording volume keeps fluctuating, like it's changing without me changing it.
Okay.
Really?
So I'm gonna keep an eye on that and keep that screen open. Wow, yeah, it just dropped from 0.78 to 0.58, and now it's down to 0.48.
Do you want to start over?
Well, no, I think we're good, but I feel like part of that rant I gave might have been quieter. Like it'll have to be boosted. But I also don't know why it's doing this, and I would like to. Hey, people watching the stream, I would like to figure that out so it's not something I have to work on the entire time, you know.
Makes
so
sense.
Let me see. Audacity recording volume changes. Oh, that's a top search. So auto adjusting input levels. As I'm recording, it's changing. Yes, that's what's happening. We can easily fix. Great.
Thank God.
And so it's the riding gain in radio.
I did throw this Twitch channel a host, by the way. So
thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
So it says, let's say, yeah, make sure you don't use that option ever. I don't use that option. I guess skimming that didn't work. Input level in Audacity, moving as you are speaking, because all software. So I bet it's because we're recording through Discord and I've got different audio settings. So let me just tweak those settings.
Okay.
We got it.
Input mode.
Because on my end, you sound completely normal.
Yeah. So let's see here. If I get rid of, no, that would not do it. Automatic gain noise. Okay. So I think I should be good now. Are you guys still hearing me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to set this to a level and just occasionally look at it to make sure it's good. I'm going to do a quick pause. Let's recap, just because I want to go back and look and make sure that wasn't all silent and it shouldn't be recorded over.
Okay.
I think it just dropped when I started yelling.
Okay.
All right. We are professional podcasters. We're so good at this. We're so good at this.
There's always technical issues. You basically have to meet an hour beforehand if you want things to go smoothly.
So that was all good when we started. I'm just trying to make sure the little noises I'm saying. Okay, so I think it's all at a level where it seems like it can be boosted without terribly distorting it. And if not, I will just re-record my part because I can just listen to what I said and re-record it. So, Chris, you just let me know in editing if it's really messed up when you pick it up, but it sounds decent on my headphones, so I don't think it'll be an issue.
All right.
All right, so I'm going to start recording again, and Chris, you want to give us another clap?
Hold on. Should I just leave my thing recording, or?
Yeah, I think that'll be fine. Like, if you guys just leave recording, and then Chris knows where to, like, the second clap is when we start it again.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Cool.
Cool.
We're back.
I'm at 0.71. Yeah, so gosh, wasn't that cool for people listening? Okay. So, now
I don't think the sequels will age well. Echo.
I guess so. My initial take on this is I want to know what you mean by age well. Like, do you mean it won't age well in the sense of the political climate of things not aging well these days? Do you mean it won't age well as in like people who are big fans of like Scarface and they forget about the fact he died in a pile of cocaine? Or it won't age well as in like no one's going to care about these in 30 years?
Good question. So there's basically two parts. There's basically two parts to that. I think they're not going to age well for two main reasons. One, it was not the trilogy was not cohesive at all, which everyone says, but we can unpack that a bit. But the second one is the tone. The tone of the trilogy was completely different than the sequels or than the original trilogy and the prequels. And we can definitely dig more into that. But
let's talk tone.
Okay.
When you say tonally, because I think I actually may agree. I've repeated this a lot of times in talking about these, but I felt like the whole trilogy hasn't been emotionally impactful for me on the same level because they kind of remind me of Marvel movies in that it's just like, fun and this, but there's not the same weight.
100%. The first bullet point I have is full of Marvel humor. Their philosophy on humor basically is if there's a moment that goes on for too long that's serious, throw in a joke. Or, no character is sacred to this humor. Anyone makes the joke. Anyone makes the one-liner. And I think that just wasn't, like, I would say the worst of the prequels' humor is all of the humor of the sequels. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like, and part of where the prequel humor got bad, was with the Jar Jar stuff for some people, but like I feel like humor is kind of a 3PO thing and maybe some dry quips from Han. Uh, I can see what you're saying with every single character having to have their Captain America, oh, watch your language kind of line.
Yeah, or just repeating, making loud sounds, or just repeating things. That you guys mentioned it, the "they fly now" joke.
Yeah.
There was no joke there. That was saying the same thing 3 times. It didn't seem like the characters like would have said that. Like it just seems like it's out of nowhere, and it does not seem like it was fit. It fits in the Star Wars tone at all. That's just one aspect of it, though. But I'd say a fairly big one that not a lot of like I'm sure we've all watched YouTube videos about analyzing them and stuff, and I haven't seen people talk about the humor very much. So I think that's pretty interesting.
I think the humor like is actually funny at times, and I laugh, but I do think it is like kind of part of the very specific kind of humor, which is the Marvel kind. Like it's not very unique. So I think in terms of talking about how it will age, it's like, hey, remember those like 10 years where we got all the superhero movies and then Star Wars came and all the humor was kind of like this. Like I don't know how I would quite describe that, but I mean you kind of did. It's always like those quips.
Yeah.
And being kind of like ridiculous cuz like Finn was kind of like that, like yelling a lot, and so was Poe. Like they both like yelled a lot like at each other, and it was kind of funny, but it also takes away like some of the weight, like Al kind of
Like
said.
here's a good comparison, I think. So, in my opinion, some of the more genuine, fun comedic moments in Star Wars, whether it's the prequels or the original, are the more subtle quips. The Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn, you're right, the negotiations were short. That was funny. Like little things like that. Also, there's a moment like that was also mentioned in your guys' last episode. That's not how the Force works. That's a funny Han Solo quote, I think, because that's something he would say, and that just felt like really natural. Um,
You
and
thought
so,
that
and I
was
think for the
natural from Han to say that?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
I knew you guys were making fun of it, but I actually thought it was something that he would have said.
Okay.
Um, in in the sequel trilogy, there's a few moments in Rise of Skywalker that were subtle humor, and they went the farthest. There was that kind of exchange. I don't remember her name, but there's that female character and Poe, and they kind of have a little thing, and he kind of wants to kiss her or whatever, and she says no. And then there's a moment at the very end where they just kind of look at each other, and she shakes her head, and you know what they're talking about. I think that was such a good comedic moment in the sequels because it wasn't over the top like everything else was in that movie. You know.
I like that moment because when you don't have to really say anything for something to be funny, that's usually a good joke.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, I does that answer your question, Alex, about the humor side that I had in mind for that?
Yeah, well, and my initial question I think was about what not aging well.
Mhm.
And I get what you're saying in terms of tonally. I don't know. Chris, what do you think on the tone?
So I think the tone is actually interesting to think about if you compare it to the prequels. I think the prequels had a very consistent tone. Like I think it really just got I think it really just
political thriller, right? That was the tone of the prequels.
I mean, you can say there's a lot of things wrong with it, but I mean, it was consistent. Like I think with the tone and like becoming a little bit, there's always this undercurrent of unease and uncertainty, mystery, just feeling like things aren't quite right, even as things could be like as fun as the Force is and as fun as the Star Wars universe is like something, and we just know there's this darkness, this in the background, this someone's architecting something we don't quite understand what it is, and obviously we all know where this goes too. Like we know this isn't gonna end well. Like we know that from the very beginning. Whereas the sequels, can you really compare the tone of the Force Awakens to the Last Jedi?
You can compare them
I
and
mean,
how
yeah,
different
can
are.
they really be considered similar? I'm
No,
not sure if that's
no.
a bad thing or not, but it's definitely not consistent.
Hmm. And I mean, like that's like the first point. I would say cohesiveness in the story and the characters and all that, which has been done up by a lot of people.
Sure.
But the tone, they almost go hand in hand, I suppose. Because I would say the first part's the humor. There's two more parts to the tone in my sort of thesis. The second one is it can't decide if it's a tribute to the original trilogy or a deconstruction of the original trilogy. it doesn't feel like Star Wars. It feels like a meta analysis of Star Wars to me. And the last one is the cameos. All the actors you know and love from the original, they kind of show up in this sort of cameo way. Like Lando just appears on this planet, and in the first movie you have Han and Leia, and just all this exposition about, oh, I've been away, and it feels sort of uncomfortable in some ways, and the tone just felt like, I don't know, it felt weird to me.
I haven't thought about the cameo aspect of it. And when you first said that, I thought you were talking like Daniel Craig and things like that. But when you think about it from a Lando and like Han perspective, yeah, in the prequel trilogy, it wasn't like, there were bits and pieces there, but it wasn't like feeling the need to shoehorn so many in the same way.
Exactly.
It was kind of like its own standalone thing that then built towards, the babies are Luke and Leia, but it wasn't, oh, we gotta show Han here and this, and that's a interesting point. Now, I guess what I feel like in general with this discussion, we can call it, is I basically agree with your overall thesis. Like, I don't think in 30 years people are going to look back super fondly on these movies, but I'm also not sure if that's so much of a Star Wars problem specifically as the state of media problem and how much stuff is out there. And like, I don't know that anything from this generation is going to be looked back at like Empire is, or like The Godfather, or I don't know,
Game of
old
Thrones.
Steve McQueen movies. And frequent listeners know I've never watched Game of Thrones.
I haven't either.
So
You have to say that before the show starts. Like any conversation begins.
Yeah.
And with Game of Thrones,
So,
you have to
by
say
the
way,
way,
I haven't watched it. You have to say
Yeah.
that part. And I know, and I'm outing you to everyone. All of my friends, 3 of them will know.
they're all watching the stream
All
right now.
3 of them. I think it's a, yeah. What is it like? Is this just because no movies are going to be aging well, which is what Al is saying, or are these particularly going to age worse than the average movie? I still think is an interesting thing. I think it's interesting when you try to compare it to the other trilogies too, because if we were to look at each 3, which ones would we say would age well? Obviously, the original, right?
Yeah, but I feel like the prequel trilogy is aging well. Not just from my own perspective, but I feel like retrospectively, people who were kind of against the prequels are now looking back a little more fondly at them and like, oh, Sith, there's some really cool things going on in a way that happened at the time. But I don't know. I feel like the overall take on them is a little fonder as time has gone on. And people had those years of, oh, that's the most recent Star Wars, so even though I didn't love it, I'm going to keep rewatching it because it's Star Wars. And that's another thing that could lead to this trilogy not aging that well, is this won't be the most recent Star Wars. Like, they're going to keep making stuff. So we're not going to have that 20 years where it's like, oh, I didn't love this, but I want to revisit episodes 7, 8, 9 because it's all the Star Wars I have.
Yeah, we're going to be
so inundated with Star Wars.
Also, man, you brought up a really good point that I wanted to touch on, but I'm not sure if I remember it. But
write it down, Chris.
I wish I had written it down, but I feel like,
it doesn't know if it's a tribute or a deconstruction.
No. On the prequel side of things, I just think it's become bigger in the culture, but not necessarily as movies themselves. Like it's not like, oh man, look at those movies. Like you just gotta watch the whole thing. No, it's like it's in the meme culture. Like it's in the discussion. Like we still like to talk about it because there's so many plot beats that are actually very interesting to dissect and think about. But then when you look at it on screen, it's like you still remember like how awkward it was when Padme and Anakin had like 20 minutes together, and you wanted to stop now.
I never want that to stop. Padme's beautiful.
Oh God, there's some scenes with them in episode 2 where I'm barfing. Like, but I still am like looking forward to like the battle with Obi-Wan and like and Jango
Exactly.
Fett. You know, I'm still looking
I
forward to the battle
and
of the arena at the end.
I have to bring this up because you were on my friend Anna's podcast
Mm-hmm.
last week, and she wanted me to bring this up. But one thing, speaking of Anakin and being really awkward, they remade the first movies or whatever, and they added this new CGI and they added new scenes and all that. Can you guys help me confirm something that I almost didn't believe was in the remake of Episode 1? Like, they went on the theaters again and all that.
Yeah, we'll absolutely
There's a scene.
100% help you confirm it right now.
Okay, excellent. There is a scene that I didn't remember in the original one, so I know it's there because I rewatched it and I just was like, wow, why is this here? But I didn't know if it was in the original cut or not. And that's a scene where they just get into Coruscant for the first time. It's Anakin and Jar Jar and that crew. And Jar Jar turns to Anakin and says something like, "That Padme, pretty hot."
Did that happen?
Now, I recall this happening, and I thought, there's no way. There's no way that's a scene. There's absolutely no way. And I watched on Netflix. I turned on subtitles, and it says, P-I-D-Y, I guess that's Jar Jar speak for pretty, pity hot. That Padme, pity hot.
Oh, when you say it like that, I could actually see it.
You have to do the impression.
That's as far as you're getting in terms of an impression.
I can't. I said I would 100% confirm it. I cannot, but I think it probably. I could have seen that being in the original cut. I don't think. I'm not aware of tampering in the prequels. Like I don't know of. I haven't heard of any tampering in the
tampering. Magic Johnson didn't get involved.
No, they added to the speed race, the pod racing scene.
Okay.
We know that.
Okay, so I know that there's been lots of tampering, with the original trilogy. We all know that.
Yes.
But I didn't actually know that that they were doing anything with the prequels.
They CGI'd Yoda because he was obviously a puppet in episode 1.
Yeah, that's right. Gosh.
So they did do some of that. So
stupid.
That's why I'm like, listeners, someone help me out here. Was this bizarre scene in the original cut, or was it added later? Because 1's bad, but 2's even worse, in my opinion.
In terms of the episode 1 versus episode 2, or
no, scenario 1 is worse or better than scenario 2, where if they actually added that scene later.
Right.
They decided this was something it just couldn't be without.
Yeah. I actually can't say it. Al, do you remember?
I don't. I haven't watched episode 1 in quite a while, and a copy I have of it though. So I've got like the Blu-ray box set, whatever. But then I've also got a copy of Phantom Menace that came out of a cereal box back in the day. So I could watch those back to back and probably be able to tell what was added when.
Please get back to me on that. It is killing me.
Yeah. You guys hold on. I'll be right back.
So I don't want to. I know we want to move on to a new point, but I just think we all talk about like maybe Al, I wasn't actually sure if you were going to say it did age well, the original trilogy, but I don't know if it would have aged well without all of George's updates and tampering. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if it would, even though I complain and we all complain about it, like I do think it has kept it relevant.
Yeah, you could go either way on that, and we're speaking in hypotheticals where we don't know how people would view it otherwise in terms of exposure to new generations and all that. But I think the original trilogy, I don't know, maybe I'm biased and I'm seeing this through my space-colored glasses, but I feel like those are genuinely good movies. Like outside of Star Wars fandom, those were just well-made sci-fi Western kind of movies.
I think that's a good take. I agree with that.
So, all those old actual Western movies, I guess they haven't aged with the popularity of Star Wars, but I still enjoy watching them despite no updates. But maybe I'm the crazy one.
Well, sci-fi killed Westerns, right?
Yeah, kind of. They still make Westerns, but a lot of them are remakes of old Westerns.
Or they're cowboys versus aliens. They just mashed the two together.
Which I thought was great. Like, it's everything I want in a movie.
I low-key loved that movie.
Yeah. That and Real Steel. Did you guys see that?
No.
It was Hugh Jackman teaching. It was basically like giant Rock'em Sock'em robots.
Oh, I remember now.
and like looks so stupid. It was great, incredible. Like, well, I won't go incredible, but I liked it a lot. uh, so yeah, Real Steel, Star Wars, aging well. I don't think Real Steel will age better than Star Wars. Back on topic. There we go.
So here's a question: do we want to wrap up the tone piece and go back into the story not being cohesive part of
Yeah,
it?
yeah. Let's do that.
Okay,
But I do think those go together because
they do.
with the multiple directors, like a Wes Anderson movie and a David Fincher movie, have different tones.
Yeah,
In case you
exactly.
guys hadn't noticed that. So yeah, what were you gonna say?
I just want to say, and just to recap the tone part, the humor was odd. We addressed that. Can't decide. I want to talk more about. Can't decide if it's a tribute or deconstruction of Star Wars. So,
Yes.
and that's very explicitly clear in J.J. Abrams' vision and Ryan Johnson's vision. J.J. Abrams wants it to be a tribute. Ryan Johnson wants it to be a deconstruction. They got sandwiched. The story went everywhere. There was no vision beforehand. All those things are things that we know. But I think that messed with the tone severely. Not just the cohesiveness of the story and like it was hard to follow, but just the tone was everywhere. And then lastly, the cameos, like we said, they felt really strange.
We don't usually have guests come in with their ideas as like a written out theme paper,
Well,
term paper. Like
I had a lot of thoughts and I wanted to get them in so we didn't drone on and on. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So I think go ahead, Al.
No. Please, Chris.
I kind of wanted to touch on just just a question. Like, do you think without the Last Jedi, we would because after the Last Jedi, it really did become more of an idea cemented to me that the Jedi were more flawed than I'd ever thought before. Like, it seemed like you could really look at a lot of the flaws from the prequels, but you could probably have argued, hey, just a really bad guy got involved and messed. You know what I mean? Like, what could they go do against such evil? But then the Last Jedi, I think, really wants to ram it home that they were a flawed order, like just innately. What do you guys think about that? Like, do you think it took the Last Jedi to get there? Or, like, could we have gotten there without that?
I don't think, I think it's a director thing. So I think if JJ did all three films or if Ryan did all three films, I think it would have been a better result than what we got. And I think if it was just JJ, we would have never gotten to that topic that you just talked about. If it was Ryan, we would have gone full in on that topic, I think.
Yes. Which
That's what I think.
is not necessarily like something I disagree or wouldn't like, but they weren't willing to commit.
Yep.
I think that's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and any idea done all the way is usually going to be better than two ideas done half of the way.
Yeah, because I think that's the only way that I can reconcile. I don't know if reconcile is the right word, but everyone
It's
says, okay, thank you. I need that correction from you, Al.
I don't have the right word. I'm just confirming you have the wrong.
I know you're wrong. I don't know what's right, but it's all that stuff about like how Ryan Johnson ruined my childhood because of Luke Skywalker not being the man anymore. But then they kind of were like, but he's kind of the man. Look, he helped do all these cool things in The Rise of Skywalker. I redeemed him for you. JJ's like, I saved your childhood.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think if your childhood is based on Luke Skywalker being the man, then maybe you should have gone for a swim in the creek one more time.
Whoa, Al, you can't say that. No,
You can't say gone for a swim in the creek.
you definitely can't say that. But
oh my! I said the same thing twice.
No, I'm not in that court of like, yeah, he ruined my childhood. I would have preferred they'd gone a different way with him, but sure. I think it's just indicative of like the Jedi as a whole, and like Luke was representing that, like through his failure.
Mm-hmm. All right, so unless David, did you have another point before I ask a big broad question?
No,
Ooh,
I think
I'm excited.
That was a good analysis.
So my point, if we're going to talk about whether this trilogy is going to age well, the question I want to posit to the both of you is, what makes media age well?
I think telling a good story is central to that. And I think then you can ask, well, what's a good story? Where's the rise and fall and the climax and everything you think about in an epic, for example, or something. But I think anything that examines the human condition in an effective, believable way. You could be shooting laser swords or whatever you want, but as long as it's a story with characters and there's stakes. So that there it is, stakes. So if there's real stakes, I think that's timeless. I think, well, you even talked about this in the last episode again, but the stakes were just bizarre. So either there were no consequences for actions, like in the last Skywalker, Rise of Skywalker, or they were just the wrong sacrifices, right? Like you could argue, Luke's death. Like, why did Luke die when Leia should have died in an earlier scene? Why did Chewbacca not really die in the last one? Why, it doesn't seem like, and I think it goes back to the cohesiveness problem, is they didn't have an end goal. So they said, let's make sacrifices here. Oh man, people did not like those sacrifices, so let's just make no sacrifices at the end, except for maybe one character. And so I think that probably added to it a little bit. And I think that hinges on stakes more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they tried to have it both. They tried to have their cake and eat it too, in that regard, where there are a lot of like pseudo deaths and fake outs, and it was like, oh no, he's not really dead, because that would just be a little bit too much. We're not willing to go that far.
So I'll push back on your stakes thing a little bit. I do mostly agree. But like the last Godzilla movie, there's very big stakes there. This critter's going to kill the world. That's not going to age as like a classic movie.
True.
So one part, and these are all thoughts I'm kind of having for the first time here, so bear with me. But the stakes have to be there. But then I also think being able to really fully care about the characters. And do you guys think that potentially with this latest trilogy, they tried to go the Avengers route and they gave us too many characters we were supposed to care about?
Yeah.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Because if you think about the original trilogy, like really we care about Luke. And then to a certain extent, we care about Han and Leia. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of about it. In this, we're supposed to really care about the bad guy. Like, there's never a point in the, other than when he takes his helmet off, whatever, spoiler alert, there's never a point in the original trilogy where we have to care about Darth Vader. Like, he's a bad guy who's going to do bad things, but it's not like, oh, I'm really rooting for him here. But yeah, they try and force that with Kylo.
Yeah.
And Finn, and then you have Luke, Leia, and Han coming back, characters you're already supposed to care about. So all of a sudden, it's like I'm supposed to care about all of the Avengers, where I cared a lot more about The Amazing Spider-Man when it was just Andrew Garfield. I am mixing so many things right now. Godzilla was actually pretty good too, but thoughts?
I think the characters thing is important. I remember.
Thanks.
So, like, there's just a lot there. So, like, in terms of the original trilogy, I just remember when, in episode 6, when Luke was actually battling Vader, the moment when he actually said, "Hey, if I can't get you to turn, I'll get your sister." I just remember, like, when I was, even now, like, it still really, it really touches me. Like, it really makes me angry, and like, I feel bad. Like, I don't want him to hurt Leia. Like, that's just, You've gone too far, you evil son of a gun. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think they ever could have made me feel that way. Like, in this original, and I'm sorry, in the sequels, I don't think I could have gotten that kind of emotion. I did care about Rey, and I think they did it pretty well with that, but you couldn't get that for me with Finn or Rose or... Man,
I think Kylo Ren is the only character I remotely cared about, actually, in the sequels. I did not care about anybody else. I mean, like, I think he was the one redeemable thing about the whole thing. I thought an angsty Sith who wants to be someone that he's not, that's a new idea, and that's really fun I thought that was really fun to see in the sequel trilogy. But the problem is, Rey, like, whatever scrape she got in, she would get out of it. So I didn't care about her because Like she's untouchable. Nothing's gonna happen to her.
Yeah, she's a paragon of virtue.
To go along with my theory too, I think in the like 3 is really kind of the max level, because in the prequels too, you really only care about, for the entirety of the trilogy, Anakin, Padme, and Obi-Wan.
The magic number.
Like Darth Maul was cool. I wasn't meant to feel things about him.
No,
Yeah.
but you
And
had
I'm
to have
not
the
good at
big
feeling
bad.
things in general. Like,
Yeah, you had to have the big bad to put those guys up against.
yeah.
But I think you were asking before, like, what makes a good movie, like what makes it age
What makes
well.
it age well, yes.
Yeah, and I think I'm trying to figure that out. I it's hard to dissect that, but part of it I think is like what are the core themes that anchor you in this movie? Like what's the core message? That has to always kind of make its way throughout the movie. Like it has to come down to of kind of a very simple message or maybe a few points that you're consistently moving towards or showing like what is that in Star Wars, like in the original trilogy. I think you could pretty easily dissect the core themes that make it interesting. Like there are a few of them. I think we maybe could cover them in a different podcast, but
Yeah. You want to go into the thematic structure of those movies?
Yeah, but I think partly they did have some interesting themes that you could always come back to. Whereas, what is that in these new movies? They have a different one probably every time it changes directors.
The flavor of the week.
Some things are also a little bit more trendy in terms of what's important in the world and things that are not.
And that, I think, is something that usually doesn't age well.
Right.
It's more of those timeless values, and that's why so many of
Timeless
you think
values.
about the great all-time movies, they come back to similar themes, because there aren't really that many themes that carry over through generation to generation. But like, there's a reason It's a Wonderful Life still feels like a fresh, new, awesome movie every time I watch it. Or Rocky, like the first Rocky, that underdog story and someone working for something like that is always going to translate over. Where I don't know, the pick another random movie from the 70s that no one watches anymore, and why did it not?
Yeah, and the premise is never like, well, I got to sit you down and we're gonna have to talk about this for a really long time. They're pretty simple premise and what makes those movies interesting and enjoyable.
Do you want to think
goes
about
to a town, no dancing allowed? It's super simple.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about maybe elements of the sequel trilogy that did age well? Because I have some thoughts there, but I'm curious what.
Oh, please,
if you
yeah.
guys
Talk
think of
about
anything.
anything.
Yeah, what thoughts do you have?
Well, I think in contrast to the prequels, our beloved prequels, I would say in general there was better actors involved in the sequel trilogy. I think they're all really good actors. I don't think the characters were very well maximized, but in spite of the characters, I think the actors were really strong. I also think the cinematography was really strong, especially in The Force Awakens.
Oh yeah.
Like it just had me captured, man. And lastly, I would say didn't feel like CGI was in your face all the time. See, I'm also a prequels fan, and so it doesn't bother me as much as your standard Star Wars fan. That people do talk about the CGI in the prequels. I don't view them that way. But one thing that did stick out to me was that didn't seem like it was a problem in the sequels very much.
I think that's very true. Al, what were you gonna say?
I agree wholeheartedly. And with the performances, I think especially Oscar Isaac is going to age really well. I think he's the kind of guy that people 40 years from now are going to be looking back as like one of the actors of our generation. The way people look back at the big names of the 50s and 60s. And like, I think his character is going to become one that, obviously there's a lot of kids or whatever that are into it now, but I think his character won't be Han Solo, but it'll be like the next tier below that.
Yeah, I think the performances are a lot better. in the sequels than the prequels, even though there are some really good actors in there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Like there are good actors. Like you can look across the room and you can see some pretty big names, but I don't know if it has something to do with the direction they were given or the fact that they're all constantly just behind a green screen and they're not really going to any locations. Because episode 3 was completely shot inside of a studio. They did not go anywhere.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it seems. I think that there's a lot of trickery in the sequels to make us believe that the settings are a lot more real than they are. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's how good they've gotten with it.
Mm-hmm.
I read an interview recently on Screen Rant with like the effects team, and a lot of the people are the same exact people from the prequels that did the effects, and that actually did the lighting and the camera crew. Like a lot of the same names are still there, um, but they said that they're doing such a better job of making it believable.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think like they did run rampant with that technology though. As soon as it was available, like George was like, "Let's run with it," and it's like we're not quite ready. Like now we're much better place. Besides the fact that when you're getting 1,000 star destroyers, like things are on the screen, like things look pretty
Yeah.
believable.
Oh boy. Yeah,
That
fan
was a
fiction
scene,
was
all
my
right.
favorite movie ever.
um, yeah, I'm trying to think if I have any other big things that are really going to age well. I mean, part of this is you don't know.
Yeah, you don't.
And there's been a lot of movies I've seen. I think one of us as a podcast, one of our favorite podcasts is the Rewatchables on The Ringer. And it's really hard to tell what movies are going to become those super rewatchable ones. Like, I don't know that had I seen Point Break in 1991, I would have been like, oh, yes, this is a movie I'm going to watch every single Thanksgiving for the rest of my life. But that's what I do right now
Point
because that
Break.
movie is just Point Break every Thanksgiving, just because it's aged that well. Or the same with, like, for me, Lethal Weapon 2. Sometimes it's hard to put your finger on it. And there are movies I've seen in the last 15 years, so I can remember how I felt about them at the start. And like The Social Network, I feel is one that has aged really well, and I still enjoy watching it and get things from it.
That's one of my
But there
favorite
was
movies.
the same, but there was other stuff that came out that year that I liked on a similar level and haven't had the same lasting impact for
Interesting.
me. So I think to really like for people listening to this podcast in 2040, you can tell us what we were right and wrong about. But
Yes.
a lot of this is just blatant speculation for us.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean Blade Runner is a great example, right? The critical review to that was very poor when it came out in theaters, and now it's a cult hit.
Yeah, it is.
It is. It's a cult hit.
Yeah, definitely. Same with RoboCop. But
RoboCop,
Blade Runner is
a
like
cult
regarded
hit.
as actually a good movie.
Yeah.
And I think it is.
Do you guys have anything positive to say? Now we're on the topic of just saying positive things about the sequels. Do you guys have anything positive to say about the arcs of the characters? Because we've kind of acknowledged that the acting was good. Were there any redeemable qualities about the characters that made the arcs really compelling to you?
Well, one thing that was brought up in discussions on this wasn't an original idea of mine, but I thought it was really poignant, is that Ray's arc and the whole thing at the end where she says her last name is Skywalker or whatever. I didn't necessarily love that at the time, but in thinking back on it, Ray's arc is basically showing that you are not what circumstance you're born into. You are not who your family is. You can make yourself into what you want to become. And I think that's a pretty awesome character arc to have out there.
Hmm.
It's a cool. Yeah, that is a cool thing. She kind of you can't. They say you can't choose your family, but you there are some. I don't know. Sometimes you grow up with certain people around you that you feel like you become part of their family, and they have a big impact on you. So, yeah, I think that's.
Well, and to a certain extent, you can choose your family. Like if your family's the worst, you can remove yourself from them, and that's a very hard thing for people to do. But
True. You can.
it's. But I mean, not that Ray was in a position with that family, but like she removed herself from the legacy of her family. where it could have been easy to be like, this is what Granddad did. I guess I got to be the next emperor.
Yeah.
But this is an aside, but I thought she was a Padme after The Force Awakens. Do you want to know why?
Why?
Yes.
The way she attacked with her lightsaber was very lungy in nature, and it reminded me of Sidious's fighting style.
Really? Huh.
Yep. That is a totally ridiculous.
Yeah, do you think they actually planned it that way?
No,
and
no.
Yeah.
I remember telling my brother, I'm like, she's definitely a Padme. Did you see her attack style? And he looked at me like, what? Like, is that really your theory? And I'm just here like, I told you. I told you.
A Palpatine, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I heard a Padme when you first said it, so I was really confused.
I said Padme?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
I meant Palpatine, one of those P names.
I was like, she was a Padme. Where are we going with this
Palpatine.
one?
Palpatine.
So you guessed it correctly, but for like the wrong reasons.
And I'm sure they didn't know at the time, so doubly the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
My favorite character arc is Palpatine's. He was completely dead for 2 whole movies, and then in the 3rd movie, he was alive, and I mean, he wrecked people out there. He had a full stadium of people; they were ready to watch. He had no promotion. I mean, what could he have done ahead of time?
No kidding.
You know what I mean? Like, he did
That's marketing.
The marketing team for the Emperor.
I mean, they did a lot. They did that stunt with Fortnite, and that was brilliant. They got a lot of interest on there, but I mean, honestly, brilliant.
Agreed.
David, do you have an arc you like?
This was touched on a little bit, but Kylo Ren was my favorite arc. I like how he was visible. I think one reason why I liked him is because he was actually probably the only consistent character in the entire sequel trilogy. He was just torn. He was angsty. He was trying to pretend to be Darth Vader, but he knew he wasn't. And he would openly admit this to everyone. So it just felt very consistent. As far as the end of his arc, kind of weak, but I just think the last movie was weak in general. But in general, I think he was the most compelling. I think Finn's could have been the best, though. I think they squandered Finn as a former stormtrooper. His arc was basically finished in The Force Awakens. He was completely pointless in Last Jedi, and he was just screaming Rey the whole time in the last movie. So,
yeah, he was such an afterthought in the last movie compared with obviously the first one.
Mm-hmm.
He was a great hype man. But I liked, like, he was such a likable character, like, throughout. I really just, like, every time he's on screen, I'm like, I wish I was his friend. Like, he seems so cool. But I think there's a million fan theories that people could have come up with that would have been a better arc for him, but I don't know. Then they decide that he's just force sensitive, and it's like, oh, okay, like is that the only thing that can make someone interesting in Star Wars?
But they also didn't decide that. Like,
they just hinted at it.
Yeah, I don't care what gets said in interviews. It was never part of the movie, so it's not an actual thing that happened.
He could feel her presence or whatever.
Yeah, kind of. I don't. That's the thing. Is like, if they were gonna do that, do it. Is kind of my take on it.
So,
and they didn't.
And when they were sinking the sinking sand, where he says, "Ray, I have something to tell you." Do you think that's what that was? Like, that was never ever addressed. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's the idea that people are saying is the idea, and apparently Abrams said is the idea in interviews or whatever. But it's like, it's not on screen, so it didn't.
It's not self-evident.
Happen.
No,
it is just as likely that he was going to tell her he's force sensitive as he was going to tell her that, like, he is aroused by womp rats being hung above his bed. Like, we have the exact same proof of either one of those being true.
Was that a Freudian slip? That seemed very oddly specific.
I found it as I was going along, so who knows. But so we're kind of nearing time now. Any big final thoughts, David?
Not on my side. I think this is really fun. For one thing, thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, of course. Which flavor of Jones soda do you think is going to age the best?
Berry lemonade.
I'm not talking that people are going to like in 20 years. I'm talking you leave one sitting in the back of your fridge for 20 years. What tastes the best?
Al, don't put him on the spot like that, man. That's tough.
Well, I mean, I only really have one answer, and that's berry lemonade Jones soda.
Bro, are you sponsored? Did
Not
you just
yet.
plug? Okay.
He just did a plug on our podcast that we're not going to get paid for.
No. Free
Stamps.com,
promo.
come on. And also, just for people who are curious, I mentioned it at the start, but Nintendo Variety Streamer, what are you streaming?
I currently am streaming Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, but I also stream Super Smash Bros. Melee, that 20-year-old game on Nintendo GameCube that you play on those old boxy CRTs.
So
Which one is more popular for you, just out of curiosity?
What do you mean popular for me?
Like, what do your fans
people
enjoy
watching.
more?
In general, I think right now they enjoy Ultimate because they can play with me more easily
Yeah.
on stream. But I think my roots are more Melee oriented. So
Fair enough.
So I'm a solid, not great Smash and kart player when it comes to N64 and Wii. I am the worst when it comes to GameCube. Like, for some reason, I just couldn't figure out GameCube at all. Double Dash is like I might as well not even hold the controller, and I would do just as well.
Double
But
Dash
while
is
being
on crack.
like a grade A N64 player and like a B plus Wii player, I don't
Wow.
get what it is about GameCube that just doesn't work for me.
me
It's way
neither.
different, I think.
Yeah. I was
I think
pretty
it's-
good at Super Monkey Ball on GameCube, but that was about
Nice.
it.
I think Mario Kart 64 is a really tough game to be good at. So congratulations. I think Double Dash is much easier.
I don't know. I'm very good at 64 and very bad at Double Dash, so
We should play sometime.
yeah. Well, I don't have Double Dash, but I'm always game for a game of 64. So yeah, tell people more details on how to find you and your
Okay.
stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, like Alex said earlier, I'm on Twitch, David V. Kimball. Kind of long, I know. It is my full name, but I do have it everywhere. Because
Wait,
some people,
Your full middle name or just an initial?
well, it's an initial.
Okay. I thought it would be cool if your middle name was just an initial.
It'd be like Homer J. Simpson.
Yeah. Same.
No,
thing.
but like, people get some username they get attached to, and then they join a new social network and someone's taken it. So they gotta add the 01 or they gotta add the underscore or whatever it is. It is the worst. So I said, okay, what is one thing that no one will ever have? And I just picked that and then I've stuck with it.
Beautiful.
Chris, any last overarching thoughts?
I think I want to look towards the future. I'm really hoping they do go for some new places and not just try to weed like pin the what's it called, thread the needle in between all the other existing Star Wars properties and movies. I want them to go somewhere else for wherever we go in the future. So that's in terms of looking towards, what's next.
All right, I say to really gauge if it seems we're all in consensus that these won't age that well. I'm sorry we didn't have a good heated argument, but I say to really find out if we're right. Let's reconvene February 2040, and we can talk about the legacy of the movies.
All right.
I am so there. It's on my calendar right now, actually.
Perfect.
Great. Well, I will talk to you guys then. Thanks everyone for listening. Obviously, iTunes is not a thing anymore. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all the other things that people do podcasts on. Like us on Facebook, follow our Instagram and Twitter, and send us presents and your thoughts and comments. We've got our new series, Duel of the Fates, which we're looking for questions on. So send us questions you want us to answer or anything you want us touching on. We got some fun guests lined up for the next few weeks and a few podcasts that are just the loose cannon bros. So thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks for listening, everyone. David, thanks for coming on with us.
Thank you. It was
Thanks,
really fun.
David.
All right. Night,
Cool.
everybody.
Stop.